the endless treadmill, the goalpost, constantly moving forward. Itemization is good, but it can be better.
As the great scholar Rich Campbell scribed into the annals of time, running around like ants in Bobby Kotick's maze.
To provide some background, I've played WoW from a casual perspective, mainly leveling alts and exploring, since vanilla, and began raiding more seriously at the end of Warlords of Draenor, and on and off in Legion and Battle for Azeroth. I've cleared heroic raids and done a few mythic bosses, but I primarily played WoW for reasons other than the endgame of raiding. And I believe the biggest reason for that was the speed that Blizzard turns out new raids with gear that makes previous content relatively irrelevant. I know, hot take. But mister, the gear you get makes the next tier easier to get, and it makes leveling in the next expansion easier, which makes it quicker to get to raid, and so on. Now that's not to say I dislike WoW's loot treadmill, although some iterations were better than others. However, I wanted to pose the question, what if WoW's gear was always relevant? What exactly is relevant? Does it mean that every piece of gear is in the meta? Of course not. I have the majority of my MMO experience in 3 games: World of Warcraft, Elder Scrolls Online, and Guild Wars 2. I'm slogging my way through Final Fantasy, but I've started and stopped numerous times over the years. You know exactly where I stopped every time. I've tried to experience all forms of content in all 3 games. While I love WoW's story, lore, and certain gameplay aspects, it is admittedly nostalgia that keeps me personally playing it. The reason I mention my experience in other MMOs briefly is to explain that while I've stepped foot into only one raid in Guild Wars 2, ESO I have relatively the best gear I could ever want on my main for all forms of content. But we don't dwell on that dark place. As an aside, please don't price gouge the Bright Throat Boast Inferno staff. I'm so close to having my PvP set. I beg you, please. I digress. So why do I still come back to ESO when I have, relatively, my best in slot, and have a played time that's catching up to my main in WoW that I've played since the start of Cataclysm? For those unfamiliar with ESO's gearing system, you hit the max level of 50.
Oh, no.
Okay, so not the max. You hit the max level, and then you unlock champion points. For Blizzard fans, this is similar to the Paragon system in Diablo 3. And experience gained after hitting level 50 will go towards champion points, or CP. Once you hit CP 160, all gear obtained is the best it can ever be. To improve the gear that you get at CP 160, you use the crafting skill lines to upgrade the quality of the gear. WoW does this system to a degree, but instead of crafting being the source of better quality gear, it comes from the Mythic Plus system and higher difficulty raids. Throughout WoW's history and recently, there have been systems that reward currencies for farming content in order to upgrade gear as well. The key difference is the caps in place. When you upgrade gear in WoW, it will always be good to a certain bracket, where in ESO, any CP 160 gear has the potential to be your best in slot. In WoW, a piece of dungeon or raid gear that drops from an early patch will likely no longer be best in slot come the next patch. As an example, here's a best in slot list from one of the best ESO build creators. Perfect Vestment of Olorime is considered the best gear you can get. So, all of you with your WoW Mega 5 head brain mentality of knowing that this must drop from the current Mythic raid unless Blizzard released some out of season April Fool's joke that made it so, I don't know, you could buy your best off of the player auction house, as if they hadn't learned from D3's real money transaction auction house. From buying down equipped gear that accounts for 90% of your DPS on a random proc from an RNG system that... Where was I? Alright, you'll have to trust me on this one, but originally, the best in slot for the Head and Shoulder set, these are usually monster sets which come from dungeons, but we'll discuss that more later. Originally the set came from a relatively current patch, but then the Rebalancing Nation attacked. So the set that was once king was replaced, and unlike in WoW, the set that took the new mantle was an old relic that comes from one of the first dungeons you explore. Granted, on its max level difficulty, but again, more on that later.
Look at me, sure. Look at me, sure. I'm the captain now.
Imagine for a moment, you're relaxing on your favorite arms warrior, and a new patch drops. You're excited to run the new mega dungeon or raid, but what's this? You read the patch notes, as all good raiders do. And you notice that, besides your decision to go Necrolord being welcome with a hearty buff that made me, as a Guardian Druid main that swore by the mantle of Draka, weep with joy. But in this hypothetical where Necrolord is actually meta, instead of comprising approximately myself, every DK player with their floppy extra arm, and those filthy Resto Shamans that reject the bloody bounty of a DPS and healing increase. In this hypothetical world, imagine that the patch notes state that the new weapon from Raid gives plus 10 healing, and has no main stat on it. Imagine a weapon without main stat. Additionally, your current weapon was nerfed into the ground, but in the mail you receive 10 anima compensation. Who am I kidding? It would be 5 anima if anything. But hey, new 6-month Stormount on the way. In this situation, you panic. What do I do now, you ask? Then you think, wait a minute. If I farm Nomergon, I can get the manual crowd pummeler. Then I'll be raid optimal again. This is an oversimplification of things, explained in an extremely roundabout way. But assuming I don't wait another 9 months to upload, you'll have to come to love extreme oversimplifications. The takeaway from this hypothetical, before we dive into the implications for WoW, is imagine a setting where Nomergon, or Deadmines, is relevant in endgame. WoW has begun level scaling over the past few years, and coming more in line with games like ESO and Guild Wars 2. However, the key distinction being that certain content no longer serves a gameplay power purpose after a certain level or amount of endgame progression. With the removal of tier sets, gear is predominantly stats, and stats scale with item level. Therefore, while there exists a level 15 and level 30 version of weapons and armor from Deadmines, as well as a dungeon like Freehold from Battle for Azeroth, as soon as you enter Shadowlands, everything that came before is irrelevant. This creates an issue and potential conundrum for us to explore. Why would a system that allows to get your best in slot in 2018 encourage continued gameplay in 2021? Why does this system work to keep players playing, and a system like the loot treadmill in an expansion like Legion or BFA, with Titan forging and constant promise of better gear, just one virtual die roll away, also seem to work? First, why do people run old content in WoW? Well, there are mounts to collect and gear to collect for the appearance system. You want the blinged out Gmod? Or perhaps the crown cosmetics in all 4 colors from the same raid? I guess you better get a raid going to farm that old content, or wait until the end of expansion when it's soloable. So beyond the joy of exploring the caverns and halls of long-forgotten places, or strolling down memory lane, there's really no reason to run old content beyond cosmetic improvements. And this isn't Fashion Wars 2, mind you. Although a well-designed transmog does increase DPS and HPS, unless it's PvP, then a TGC tabard and assorted greens from vanilla will do just fine. Unless you're a truly hoity-toity mythic raider, that doesn't change the appearance of gear in defiance of the gods at Blizzard Activision for adding a system that removes the ability to look at someone and tell, do they have their best in slot on? But more on that later. Much, much later. Therefore, we can decide that old content in World of Warcraft serves no real gameplay improvement purpose. And a system like this, with nearly infinite gear scaling, such as Titan forging, or pushing a new massive power gain each patch, is necessary to keep players engaged and give them a reason to run the same raid each week, and the same dungeons for 2 years before more are added. This begs the question, when does gearing stop in WoW? As of patch 9.0.5 of WoW, gearing could arguably be said to stop once you are fully geared in Mythic Castle Nathria gear. Which, if patch 9.1 comes out at the end of summer, may be everyone you know and hold dear in this world of Warcraft. Gearing could stop once you have the best items for your given difficulty bracket. Say you're a normal raider, or even an LFR raider, gearing may be done for you once you can get your weeklies done without feeling like you're fighting bullet sponges or getting nuked by elites. Full disclosure, I kept up on a character on all 4 covenants since week 2 of Shadowlands, and gave up around Renown 30. Since then, I only run my main through the weekly anima quest and collecting souls. For me, WoW ends for the week once the Renown level goes up by 2. And I complete the process in maybe an hour, depending on how good the world quests are. I'm around 208 item level, and realistically, there's nothing I'd like to run that I need more gear for. I've run the raid through once, which is enough for me to experience it, and from what I've heard from others, it's not really worth a repeat. And I've done a few keys, some rated PvP, and some of the side activities like the cutest, most blood-boiling companion of the Necrolords.
I smell it nearby.
Why does he climb the mountain every time? So ultimately, gearing in WoW can stop whenever you desire. However, you'll never have your bis forever. This takes us back to ESO's itemization scheme. A max level, max quality, properly enchanted chest piece of the same armor type will be the same as the new set added to the game in terms of stats. This puts an emphasis on crafting to upgrade gear, and some bis sets come exclusively from crafting, and the importance of set bonuses is pretty key. I want to bring us back to WoW now that we've done some of the groundwork exploring those ideas. Set bonuses in WoW were historically powerful benefits to your class or specialization that changed your gameplay or drastically improved abilities. Here's a relatively tame example looking at Druid's Tier 5 from the Burning Crusade. If you were to equip this set today, the set bonus would be deactivated to ensure balance issues or potential exploits don't occur. However, it's not to say that these sets couldn't work today. I am not a Mythic Raider. I do not pretend to be one. Therefore, I asked my closest colleagues at the old Emporium here to advise me on whether or not these effects would be objectively broken in modern WoW. While percents and specific numbers would need to be tweaked, I think that the system would still work with the constant sense of progression present in WoW, although it would mean a lot more work for the WoW development team. It may cost us a raid tier, or maybe more allied races? Cosmetic features? Let's look at the Boomkin set. A mana cost reduction for form dancing could be an interesting buff. However, with the reworking of resources on many classes over the years, would that effect be too powerful for Boomkins in PvP, or perhaps it would be underwhelming? Now consider the 4-set bonus of increased Starfire damage against Moonfire targets. That might be a good DPS increase for optimal dot maintenance, but if Moonfire costs mana, then it could be a juggling act of DPS increase versus sustain, and the reduction on regrowth in the case of needing to heal would be a bigger deal. However, resource pools change over the years. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, as now your rotation may end up being spam Moonfire, drop the stars, screw it, just press Convoke the Spirits and get 10 full moons.
And the other kids in the block would say, you know, I'm gonna
Press Convoke.
and I'd be like, I'm gonna,
Press Adaptive Swarm.
you know, you dork, go back to the chess club. Who's laughing now? Yes, I was in the chess club.
Let's look through a hypothetical weekly to-do list for getting best in slot with this proposed method. Blizzard just added this amazing world boss to Revendreth called Nurgash Muckformed. We'll down him and collect our gold, because honestly I haven't seen a drop off a world boss since week 3. Next, we'll head over to Hellfire for Magtheridon's Lair. We'll go into the group finder system and list ourselves for Mythic Magtheridon's Lair. Only pumpers need apply. Once we've collected our nice 20-slot bag and begged the fellow druid for their armor token, we can move on to Nax, where we'll need a few pieces. Let's say in this hypothetical situation, we finally got the last pieces we needed. Now we have our two sets complete. In this scenario, legendaries would still be functional, although specific effects and numbers may be tweaked to address the power differential between Legion and Shadowlands legendaries.